Good evening, everybody, and really delighted that you're here in the first of a series of online talks and discussions that Black Thrive Global, in partnership with SAI, is facilitating. And the first one this evening is the one through the perspective of councillors, and essentially the questions that we're asking: how can we improve police accountability and scrutiny from a Black perspective? And the questions will be from the lens of the political dimension, from the councillors, who are very much grassroots level and have much experience around community safety from that lens in London. So I really welcome our fellow councillors here this evening. My name's Councillor Jacqui Dyer. I'm one of the directors of Black Thrive Global, and I'm also a councillor myself in Lambeth. So I would ask my fellow councillors to introduce yourselves, and when you're introducing yourselves, could you answer this question with your introduction? How can we make sure that community-led police accountability includes the right people and is representative of all Londoners, including Black Londoners' experience of the police? Can I go firstly to Evelyn, Councillor?
Thank you. Hi, Jacqui. Thank you so much for the introduction. And I just like to say a big, thanks to everyone who's attended this meeting. I've always said, if we are to change the current situation, it will take those of us who are affected by bad policing to take a stance to change things. So well done for being here. I think what I will say in answering that question is that British policing is based on consent, and hence their ability to carry out their role rests on the public approval of their actions and behaviour. And therefore, essentially, to ensure police respond to us, and the us are those who are not being served fairly, these are the people that, should be involved in holding the police to account, because essentially the police is not working for us. And so these are Black, African, Caribbean individuals that have been, through decades, through centuries, been, disproportionately negatively impacted by police in this country. And so we have to make this a deliberate stance. We have to be deliberate about doing this. And that takes local policymakers to protect our communities from harm and enforce accountability. So for me, it is those who are negatively impacted by policing are the ones should be the people who are around the table at the forefront of holding them to account.
That is a wonderful introduction to what is potentially the right way to facilitate improving police accountability from a community lens. So thanks for that. Could you, Evelyn, just let the audience know what is your role? You're a cabinet leadership, essentially, what your portfolio.
Thank you, I totally forgot about that. So I'm Akoto. I'm a cabinet member currently in Southwark of health and well-being, and I also used to hold the community safety portfolio for about 4 years.
Thank you so much. And we're really grateful for your leadership on this agenda in the borough of Southwark. It's fantastic, and also operating in very much across neighbouring boroughs, which is how I've got to know you. So that is really excellent. Thank you so much. Might I go to Councillor Hashi?
Thank you very much, Jacqueline. Hi guys, my name is Councillor Dr. Mahamed Hashi. I am a Lambeth councillor and currently cabinet member for Safer Communities. My background is I've done a lot of youth work. So I've done 22 years of youth work. I run a soup kitchen as well for the last, actually it's our 10-year anniversary last month. So I'm quite well involved in the kind of grassroots aspect of specifically this kind of topic. From a councillor perspective. So previously I've sat on a lot of community and police engagement boards. My first one was the CPCG, so the Community Police Consultative Group. I joined that in, I think, 2011. I was then introduced to the Stop and Search Monitoring Group, where I became the vice chair and then eventually the chair. So the Stop and Search Monitoring Group is the group that holds, excuse me, that holds the police to account around their use of stop and search and scrutinizes their data. I then became the chair of the Pan London Stop and Search Community Monitoring Network at City Hall, which had representation from the 32 chairs of the Stop and Search Monitoring Groups across London. I've also sat as the deputy chair of the Safe and Neighbourhood Board, secretary of our local Safe and Neighbourhood panel. I sit on 5 advisory groups of Scotland Yard, etc. So I feel like I've got quite a decent amount of experience in especially in this question. But the reason why I joined these groups was because I was getting stopped and searched maybe 3 or 4 times a day, right? And I remember that the final straw for me was I was at the time I was a science teacher waiting for doing some tutoring outside, and I was waiting for some of the young people outside McDonald's to go and get their food. And I remember a police officer walking up to me saying to me, "You right there, mate?" And I remember thinking to myself, "Oh, why is he coming over to say hello to me?" And he said to me, "Going to be doing any stabbings or anything today?" And you know, like even that response made me laugh almost as a knee-jerk reaction because it's so absurd. But as I really thought about it, I got more and more upset. And I said to him, "Do you think, you know, actually I'm a science teacher waiting for some of my students to come out of them. Oh, well, you know, there's lots of, you know, stabbings and, you know, violence going on, you know." And I said to him, "So do you think just walking up to people randomly and asking them if they're going to do stabbings is going to, you know, solve the problem?" And I remember walking away from that exchange thinking to myself, that's absurd. How can this be allowed to happen? How can this, you know, I could have kicked off and got myself arrested, etc. How can this be allowed to happen? And I think it was based on that I went out, I really dug to see what mechanisms there was to hold the police to account. And I think a big barrier to local people and communities being involved in this is actually the awareness of the existence of these groups. You know, these groups they're so niche and so almost protected that if you don't know where to go, you don't know the meeting, and you don't know who to speak to, you know, you find a lot of these groups are chaired by the same person for like 10, 15 years because it's such a closed group. And I think the biggest thing is awareness. And I feel like the police themselves, as well as the local authorities, have to take responsibility to actually promote the existence of these groups and support in getting the right people around the table. I think as councillors, we need to continue to liaise with the police so they're up to date with who's active and who's held in high esteem. I think the best example of that for me was the recent you know, video that went viral about the young girl that was beaten up by a group of white girls outside the school. And the community response. So you had people like Raspect, people like Mac, who went up there to kind of show the girls support and demonstrate. And you know what you find is a lot of these people that are at the forefront of these kind of demonstrations don't know the existence of these groups. As a result, sometimes they're inclined to do things their way. And I'm not when I say their way, I mean in a robust and direct way, as opposed to accessing the channels that already exist. And for me, I think just 2 more points. We need to meet people where they are. So often these meetings happen in police stations, and a lot of the communities are mostly affected by the police don't have a traditional good relationship with the police. So asking them to walk into the police station is a big leap of faith, you know. And I think it's important that the venues that are used are sensitive and people really think about them in terms of who's going to come. And finally, a lot of these groups, traditionally, you have to be vetted to sit on them. And it is my kind of belief that a lot of people who have, you know, a criminal record or have a past are actually in the best position to talk about some of the issues and the key issues a lot of our young people in our communities are going through. So I think it's important that vetting is appropriate and we know why we're doing it, not just exclude people, but actually some people who might have the worst records might have the best insight about how to stop young people in our community suffering what we can see is a pandemic, not COVID, of a pandemic of violence and a pandemic of feeling forgotten.
Great. So the emphasis there, Councillor Hashi, is that you are describing alternative ways of really strengthening community-led approaches to police accountability in the sense of the current mechanisms or forums or approaches that are out there, and not forums that our community members who need to be involved are even aware of. So part of this process is actually about identifying, as you're helping to identify yourself and Councillor Evelyn, identify who might be some of the most informed people to be involved in these processes. And really, we're talking about the lived experience of being a Black Londoner. Councillor Evelyn, did you want to come back on that?
Yeah, I did. And I totally agree with what Councillor Hashi said about, you know, some of the systems we have currently just is not fit for purpose.
Yeah.
So you have individuals who, I would say, some don't have that kind of first-hand experience with the police, a negative experience with the police, and they are leading a lot of these kind of community-led oversight groups, which really is not effective. And some of them have been doing this for the past 10 years, but past decade, and they're still holding on to this role. We need a complete overhaul of what is actually happening right now, because I really don't think the current accountability system that we're having is effective. If it has been effective, then we wouldn't be where we are now. Still got a long way to go. So we need to look at it. We need to change it. We need to make sure, as you said, those with lived experience need to be around that table. I mean, Dr. Hashi just said his experience. I mean, as a Black woman, I've been stopped once, thankfully. And that even that one experience, that one-time experience was so negative. I mean, I left feeling, my God, I mean, what was that all about? You know, and if we are getting these experiences, we need to be around the table to say, actually, what you did here or how you spoke to me there actually doesn't work. And what you're doing is actually creating more animosity in the community than it needs to be. So again, I think the current system needs to be overhauled. We need people with lived experience who understand what is happening on the ground to be at the forefront of holding the police accountable.
Excellent. So that's really, really helpful. And I might just add here, because I want us to really move the discussion along so that we can have an opportunity to have questions from the audience. So if I might move you along to help answer some of the key questions that are emerging from some of the work that we've done already in terms of some of the survey and what's some of the insights that are arising. But essentially what we're trying to do here is be aware of what some of the issues are and start to conceive of what needs to take place instead, in terms of as the overhaul of you, as you said. Both councillors essentially have said that. So if you had a blank page to design community-led police accountability in London, which powers, areas of police practice should communities be involved in scrutinising? Hashi.
Oh, I was just starting to think about that question.
Yeah.
Can you come back to me, is that right?
Yeah, come briskly as well, because time is of the essence here now. Yeah.
I can jump in.
You come and then Hashi, you reflect and come again. Yeah, Evelyn.
I can jump in. I think the various areas that we all talk about, stop and search, definitely.
Yes.
We need to be able to be updated about how many stop and search has been done in our borough, why, you know, individuals were stopped, what was the outcome, so we can keep a track of that. Actually, we do that in Southwark. I've been asking for this occasionally. Basically, we need to know this. The fact that young Black boys have been handcuffed as soon as they're stopped by the police, that's another area we need to be looking at. Why is this the case? But I think for me, the biggest area is of complaints, because there's an issue that when things happen, one, the community don't know where to go to complain, and two, there's no outcome or there's no transparency about that outcome. And that's largely because nothing's really been done. I think we need to know that we need to be quite clear, make it quite clear to our communities how to make a complaint.
Yeah.
And we need to be able to be transparent enough to tell us what was the outcome of that complaint. Because I do think a lot of that time they are marking their own homework. And with the homework, the complaint department or kind of environment, we need local people to be assigned. Or I don't know, you need a lay person to be involved in this kind of investigation. so that we get the right outcome. So I think for me, the biggest area is complaints. You know, how people can complain and what is the outcome? Because I think when people get to the point whereby they feel that there is some redress to what they've experienced with the police, they will build confidence. But right now, because it's usually pushed under the carpet, the confidence is very, very low. So I think that's the area I think we really need to get involved in.
Excellent. That is really so helpful. Hashi, can you add to that? So we're talking about complaints, black incidents where black boys are being handcuffed, for example, stop and search.
Yeah, so my thing again, Evelyn, you're spot on. For me, my thing is I'll go a step further and introduce consequences. Because when we talk about complaints, what's the point of a complaint if there's no consequence or no clear consequence? And I think for me, one of the things I would really be interested in seeing introduced is the practice of joint enterprise. When you got an officer that does something clearly wrong and their colleagues stand by and see it, they'll be more inclined to get involved and stop it if they think it's going to also affect them, as opposed to, you know, them turning around and say, "Whoa, I didn't even do that." Because what that does is that undermines the entire policing. You know, it undermines the trust in the police. It undermines the police effectiveness, because you're seeing things that are clearly bad practice. And I think that the biggest example of that was George Floyd. Unfortunately, he weren't the first and he weren't the last. But what you see there's other officers who are clearly seeing this and they're not correcting it because there's no consequence for them not correcting it. And my thing, when we talk about complaints, what's the point of a complaint if there's no clear consequence? You know, I've been stopped over 60 times, and I know the law around stop and search very well. And I remember one of the last stop and searches that I got, you know, the officer said to me, I said to him, "What's the grounds?" He said, "You look young, your car looks expensive, so that's led me to believe you're a drug dealer, so I'm going to search you for drugs." Firstly, under PACE 1984, you can't stop and search someone based on their appearance. And you can't stop them based on a stereotype. And saying that because I drive a nice car, you believe I'm a drug dealer is a stereotype. Even though I'm explaining this to the officer, he's refusing it. And at that time, he has the power. Again, as Evelyn mentioned, as soon as I came out of the car, the handcuffs were applied to me straight away. I asked them, "Why have you escalated the situation?" They said, "Because you're a big lad, and if you kick off, you might harm us." What about the harm to me? What about the reputational harm? Because I look like I've done something wrong, you know, on the street, and all I've done was sit in my car. So for me, I think we have to go a step further than complaints. It has to include clear consequences that the community can hold the police to account and say, "Actually, you've done this, and you know what the consequences for that. Actually rethink your actions."
That's really helpful. So so stop and search, really much more robust data on a regular level, shared with the community, so that community can look at that data in terms of numbers, the rationale that's being applied, the outcome of that, really looking at incidents like the young girl that was viciously attacked in London outside of the school, and actually that joint enterprise of school teachers and an audience taking it very, very lightly as regards breaking up that situation. So the whole joint enterprise as a concept is a really interesting one. So then we're talking about complaints and more transparency around how to complain, where to go to complain, around the outcome, and how and how actually to do a complaint. And so that the police are not actually essentially marking their own homework, and actually much more clarity around the consequences of police actions in terms of if that is derived from complaints or the way that indeed that they've done stop and search. So scrutiny around these areas. So these are some of the powers that we want to pay more attention to, and areas of police practice that we think that the community needs to be more involved in scrutinizing. You've provided some clarity there, and we'll ask actually the audience to reflect on that as well. So what community level could these groups function, and how should they be structured? So what level of the community could these groups actually function, and how could they be structured?
Is that to any one of us?
Yes, please.
Okay. I will have a go at it. I think the community have to be involved in all levels.
All levels.
From the neighborhood model, with our local SNT group via the ward panels, etc. And ward panels are another entity or kind of meetings that need to be kind of really revamped and looked at, to being able to be in a meeting with MOPAC, the mayor, who also have ultimate responsibility for the Met. So we need an audience with him as well. So I think community has to be in different parts of the kind of the accountability structure, I would say. Is that the question? I hope
yeah, it is. It's like a what level, and then how could we structure that? So,
okay.
you know, what could that look like? Because we're all conscious of the fact that what is currently exists doesn't work. Actually, MOPAC knows it doesn't work, and the police know that it doesn't work. So we have to think from the position of imagination. So how might these actually be structured differently than what they are structured now? And at which level should they operate in a way that we are driving the level of scrutiny and accountability that is needed to address and improve the racialized experience in relation to policing? So we'll be very purposeful from a Black African Caribbean perspective.
Yeah, thank you for making that clear. Okay, so I'll start to say on the ward level. So we have a ward panels right now where we go to meetings, and these ward panels are not full. You go there and you have few people who have the same issues, that raise the same issues over and over again. So they're not effective. What we need is really we need to be targeted. We need to be intentional. So we need meetings whereby, for example, if we are getting the police to come and speak to parents, because I always say parents are a great voice and a great group in being able to help this agenda, but they're normally kind of neglected. So in Southwark, we have the Southwark Black Parents Forum, who are working to equip parents with knowledge about schooling, about exclusion, etc. So, for example, this group can invite the police to be able to speak to parents and get the parents to feed back to them.
Brilliant.
We've got youth groups, youth advisors, etc., who will be able to also meet the police and feed back. So I think we have to be intentional about the groupings that we meet that are come in front of the police, as opposed to have this kind of blanket panels that I'm sorry to say is usually kind of attended by the same faces. The other layer also is, I've always thought that we need to have an audience with the commissioner on a quarterly basis. So I want to see the commissioner in Southwark on a quarterly basis, and I want him to be open to be scrutinized and to be questioned by the community. To come to a public meeting, come and speak to the people you're meant to be policing and hear what they have to say. We need that level as well. And we also need that at the next level to be also have an audience with Sadiq. He also needs to hear what we're experiencing on the ground so that he can be effective when he's scrutinizing and working with the police at his level. So I think at all levels, we need to be there, but we need to be intentional, and we need to kind of break it up and make sure that we are meeting groups, as someone's, I think Hashi said at the beginning, where they are. Okay,
great. So one size fits all doesn't actually accommodate the racialized experience of policing. So I'm hearing completely alternative versions that are much more inclusive and intentional. Thank you for that. Hashi, is there anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, Jacqueline, I think where we have to take accountability is the fact that we keep allowing people to use the word community without defining it.
Yeah.
And that allows people to say, oh, these are people in the community because they live in the area, even though they don't interact with the area. So for me, because we haven't defined what community is, people can have anyone on a board and they're like, yeah, we've got community representatives. But as Evelyn said, you've got the same people going there for 15, 20 years and not being effective. You have to involve the most effective people. And that's what I think the membership should comprise. If we've got high levels of youth violence, we have to have young people that understand what is happening, that can feed into. But I think the biggest thing is that we must feel trusted. And that's where we talk about the inclusivity of people at all levels of the accountability, at all levels. We must feel trusted, and we must be allowed to fill or plug the gap between the police. Because right now it feels like them and us. The police come into the area, they're mistrustful of VCS organizations, they're mistrustful of community leaders, etc., and vice versa. And I think a big involvement that has previously been quite missing is really the the real value of local councillors. I think local councillors have to be at the forefront of these relationships, because they will then be able to attract local community people to these groups and to these boards, and give them a level of reassurance that actually we're the council, the police are also here, you guys are local residents and local people. Together, we're going to solve a problem, as opposed to, you know, having a lot of these police accountability groups that don't have a council representation or council support, and it raises a lot of questions for people.
So there's something about accountability which is really very present in terms of people's participation. Actually, there is an accountability for where one is located within the community, back to the community. So we can't, so I hear that clarity about representation or inclusiveness being emerged from the communities that are being served or are impacted by some of the very detrimental experiences of poor policing. We're going to have to skip some of the questions here because we're running out of time. So I'm going to look at this question, which is about what support could MOPAC provide to these groups? What support do you think that MOPAC could provide to the groups that are holding scrutiny and accountability at the various different levels that you have both articulated? What support do you think MOPAC should provide? Can we have some quick bullet points here?
Hashi, I'm going to go to you first.
Well,
bullet points, bullet points.
Yeah, just bullet points. Again, I think MOPAC has put in a lot of support, if I'm honest with you, but it's not the right people that are sitting at those tables. So I think it's about MOPAC actually giving trust to local people, local communities, local councils, and saying, actually, who are the best people for us to talk to, bring to the table, and allow them to decide within themselves how this is going to be shaped. As you said earlier, not one size fits all.
Bullet points.
That's it. That's one bullet point.
Evelyn.
I think training is going to be really important. Training the community to be able to hold them to account how to do it, you know, what to look out for. Funding for this group is going to be very important. We have to be quite, you know, honest. A lot of our communities are, you know, are on a kind of lower kind of economic scale, as it were. They need to be paid for some of the time they're putting into to come to this meeting to be able to voice it out. So I think I'll leave it on those two.
That's really helpful. And how would we know if this overhaul that you speak to of community-led engagement and scrutiny is actually working? What would be the evidence to support a claim that, you know what, it's working? How would we know? Hashi.
That's a fantastic question that I don't think is very clear. I guess, again, it's about the local community deciding what their kind of criteria are. I think what we would say in Lambeth won't be the same for Hackney, or do you know what I mean? So it's important first and foremost, and I'm going to keep laboring this throughout this whole conversation. We have to have the right people sitting around the table before we can answer any of these questions.
So local community defining what their criteria is.
Yeah, because what they'll do is they will highlight what their priorities are, and then you work towards reaching those priorities, which will be the outcome.
Okay, so that's really, really helpful. Those outcomes, that criteria of measuring success of the community-led engagement and scrutiny is what is prioritized by those communities. And I imagine that those priorities might be different in the range of different boroughs and in different neighborhoods, and you could collate them at neighborhood level, at borough level, at London level, and some of them would be similar. So we might find some similar themes across boroughs, and we might find some differences about how we would know what is working or what isn't working. So that is really helpful. Evelyn, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think I would add on an individual level that when our young Black boys are not afraid to see the police or not afraid to be around the police, that is one indication. When they feel that their problems or their concerns are being addressed, we talk about complaints and the actions out of it, that is one way of seeing that things are improving. And I think all of that, will bring that kind of community confidence. It will increase the community confidence. And I think once we get that level of confidence, we'll feel, okay, if something happens to me right now, I know who to go to, I know how to complain, and I know something's done about it. That's when we know things are improving.
Absolutely excellent. And I'm going to actually move on to the audience, for the audience to be able to ask questions to our panel members. And I don't know, may I just go through some of the questions that are actually...
Jacqui, I can read them out if that's helpful.
That'd be fantastic.
Yeah.
And could you let us know what time we've got for this bit here? Because,
yes.
And could you, before we go into that, could you help the audience to understand that we've slightly changed the format of today and what the options are? Could you do that first before we go into the questions and answers? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, no worries. So hi to the 100 or so people who have joined to listen to the councillors talk. At 7 o'clock, we had planned to open up the conversation and hold focus groups for people to have their say. Unfortunately, as you can tell, we've had some technical difficulties today. So what we'll do instead is at 7 p.m, everyone who registered to attend will receive an email with a survey. It's a short survey that we've been running so that people can have their individual voices heard around how they would answer some of the questions Councillor Jacqui Dyer has been asking. And so we will send this email at 7 o'clock with the survey link, and everyone who completes the survey will receive their voucher for participation. So please ask any questions in the Q&A section if it's unclear. But because everyone registered to attend, we can email everyone the survey. And once you've completed it, there'll be instructions for how you claim your voucher for participation. Again, I'm really sorry that we couldn't have this conversation as a group, but the survey is a really good way for you to have your say, and so that you can share how you would answer some of these questions. Councillor Dyer, is there anything else you want me to cover, or should I start?
Other than that, we can invite, they will be able to invite a following discussion that will be held after one of the other online events.
Yeah, so we're doing these talks.
The theme. So could you, in the chat, maybe put a summary of all the other themed events and the links for people to register? If that's what they want to do, that'd be helpful. And so people could join those. And at the end of that talk on those themes, there'll be an opportunity to join the breakout room discussions, where you can get really much more involved in a kind of deliberative democracy discussion, as we seek to really transform and build the alternative way to scrutinise and hold the police accountable from a Black perspective. So thank you very much, people, for your bearing with us and being adaptive with us, as you know, tech is always an issue. So
should I start with the Q&A?
Yeah. We'll use this next 20 minutes for full audience participation. If Evelyn and Hashi don't mind staying with us. Have we definitely not got the councillor from Hackney? Was she not able to get on?
No, I've spoken to Councillor Fajana-Thomas on the phone, and there's still technical problems. I've seen her be able to join Zoom, but then fall off the conversation. We're sorry about that, people. Managing expectations. We would have looked for her to be here too. Okay, so do you want to share a question that's come up? Yep, and I'm going to start at the top because some people got their questions in super early. So we have a question which says that the Stop and Search community monitoring groups and other community scrutiny bodies need to be made more representative. So they're a councillor in Wandsworth Council, and they're on their local CMG, but there's very little Black presence, and the group is largely toothless. Right. If we are really going to fix the relationship between the communities and the police, communities need to be truly empowered to call out these issues with policing. At present, I fear that this is just a tick box system with a little actual impact. And so I guess there is a question here, and it goes back to the first question you asked, Councillor Dyer. How do you get more Black community presence and the right people, like Councillor Hashi said, in these structures. So maybe it would be cool if the speakers could just summarize the two things they think would make the biggest difference.
Evelyn.
Yeah, and that's a really good question, and something that I've been really frustrated about as well for when I was doing community safety. I think we as councillors, those who are elected office, even if you're not, we have to be bold enough to call out things like this. If there's a situation whereby these groups are not reflective, representative, it has to be called out. But I know that they are managed, I believe, by MOPAC, so they're not really directly managed by the council as such. So we have some say, but not too much of a say in how the governor who actually sits around this table. And so those who oversee these structures have to be told about this, and they have to look in, I'm sorry to say, every individual group and make sure they're reflective. So totally a good question. But again, it is also important for us as local councillors to say, okay, we know this person is really active in this area, has been fighting for change. Maybe they should sit on this board and try and encourage people to join these boards. I think that's one way of also doing this.
So that's in relation to what kind of currently exists. And I think that also what we're trying to say here is that there are, that maybe some of even what exists at the moment, there are big, huge question marks on whether or not that is functioning in a way that's meeting our needs. So there's also the opportunity to be imaginative about what are the alternatives that better cater for addressing our particular experience. And it's one of, it's a structural and systemic racism that manifests itself in all different aspects of our society. And here we are focused upon looking at it through the experience that Black communities have with policing. So is it that what exists as structures to hold the police accountable at any level fit for the purpose of addressing that? So this is the question. So Hashi.
So I'll just to add on to what Evelyn said as well. One of the biggest issues is that, for example, the stop and search monitor groups are called independent groups, which means actually they're not administrated by MOPAC or the council or the police. Actually, the police just engage with them. And when you have a group like that that's been run historically by a group that's not necessarily representative, that's where the problem is, because no one can change it or fix it.
So
now,
go on, please.
So now, when you talk about trying to change that culture, what you find is, so if I come in as you know, a young man who's experienced a lot of stop and search, a lot of issues with police, and I join this group, and the group decides the issues that I'm talking about are not their priority, there's nothing I could do to change it, because the police would turn around and say, actually, this group is independent, it's independently, you know, administered independently, you know, they have their own AGMs, etc. And you find a lot of those kind of things is what bogs down the process. And I think what we need to do is start looking at how we hold ourselves to account. You know, how do you actually get support if there's a group that call themselves an independent group that's not functioning properly? We should be able to say to the police, actually, we're going to create another group and you need to be engaging with that group. And I think sometimes the issue is people pick and choose who they engage with and when they engage with them, which is the biggest problem. Also, I think that the key issue is people, when they join these groups, there's no type of formal training or support. Everyone's expected to know how you hold the police to account, how you look into data sheets and understand, you know, you really have to be an analyst with a master's in, you know, advanced mathematics to be able to understand some of the stuff that's on the paper. And to expect people in the community that are going through high levels of poverty, that are being stopped and searched all the time, that are, you know, thinking about where the next meal's coming from, to expect them to be able to sit down and learn advanced maths at a master's level in order to hold the police to account, it's just not realistic. And I think one of the things is those positions, and a lot of those positions for community members, especially those on a low income, should be remunerated for their attendance. And that will encourage people to be able to actually take time out of work if they know actually their kids are not going hungry because they're sitting down talking to police officers that they in their heart feel are racist.
So how do we not exacerbate even further the trauma that a lot of our communities, our Black communities, are already experiencing, and how do we effectively support them to be included in some of these process is in a way that is realistic and sustainable and supported.
What I was going to say, what we don't do is we don't ask them to do more with less, because we've never asked any other group to do that. And that's what it feels like, you know. We're a group of people who historically have been bottom of the barrel, mistreated, abused, everything. And then what we're saying, what we're being told is that we have to do more. So
there's something about how do you redress the imbalance actually of a lack of resources and cumulative disadvantage and oppression in this space, by really properly resourcing communities to be involved in these processes. And the processes are shaped through their hands. And this is part of what this is about. It's about helping to shape and structure what those might look like. And they might be a whole lot more agile than what it is that we've kind of previously experienced. So some of that, what we previously experienced, is like a jumping off point rather than another version of the same. Yeah. So just to sort of like bear that in mind, that we have the gift of being able to imagine alternatives. But what I'm also hearing is that there's a necessity for these to be transparent and back to the communities that they're serving, and that they are reviewed, so that people are not sort of staying in it for the length of timing them when they're no longer really actively involved or close enough to the ground to be giving relevant feedback. So that's another kind of angle. Another question, please.
So based on Councillor Hashi's comments, there have been some questions around funding, or comments that, you know, things changed when funding was pulled from local accountability groups, and that funding needs to be available to train the community leaders that sit in these groups. And so just to explain to people who are listening in what's been happening, we've been asking these questions across London, and some of the answers that come back do focus on the need to pay people that volunteer in these spaces in order to reduce the barriers to the right people, especially if they're coming from disadvantaged communities, to participate. But when we have these conversations with community members, when it's around funding and payment, how much payment, what happens if the payment actually changes the motivations of people taking part? Do any of the councillors have answers to those concerns? Because it's something that has been raised in previous events and meetings.
And also some of the suggestions, Georgia, have been that payment could be in kind, that it doesn't necessarily have to be cash or money.
Exactly, yeah. And payment could be the training, the development.
For example, the training, access to resources. So we just can't, we can think beyond resources being pounds and pence, but rather access to training, to work experience, or access to...
Sorry, Councillor Dyer. I have to say, I completely disagree, if I'm honest with you. I think when you look online and you look at all the memberships from all these boards, they value your contribution, so they remunerate you for your time. And I think we shouldn't be taking that away from the lowest paid and the ones most likely to be suffering from poverty and give them in-kind training. I don't agree with that. I think we have to put value on what we're asking them to give us.
I think Hashi, I think that there's got to be a range of ways that we're resourcing. So it doesn't need to be just one way. So we can have monetary in the way that, of course, paying for people's time is actually very critical, because it's an opportunity cost. The time that they take to be present is a time that they could have been present, actually earning a revenue stream. Yes, we agree to that. But in addition, what are the other resources that need to be right?
It's not
one or the other.
So I was just referring to people that are coming to a bracket of income that's so low
Yes.
That's what I mean. Just
Yes.
so there's this cut up, as you said, there's different levels of resources that need to be addition, and there has to be a diversity in that.
Absolutely.
So I completely agree with you. I just wanted to clarify.
We have to have a portfolio, a basket of ways of compensating people for their time and supporting people for their time and contribution that they're making. And that goes way beyond, but is inclusive of pounds and pence. Evelyn, did you have a further addition to that?
Yeah, and I totally agree with both of you. I think we need to have an array of alternatives that we, as an incentive for people. But I mean, let's be quite clear on this. For a very, very long time, the community has had to fend for itself, has had to mobilize for itself. It has had to kind of stand up and speak when, the oppositions were so strong. And I think it's at this point whereby I totally agree that we need to be compensated for the work we're doing, because at the end of the day, it's not just for our community, but it's also to make sure that we have a society that is confident in the police force. So there has to be a bit of give and take here. And I totally agree with what Hashi said. Lots of the board members, if you become a board member, you're being paid for your service. And so we need to make sure that if we're asking the community to get involved in this, if the police, if the men, if more or whatever they may be, asking the community to have a say to help shape a future police force, they need to be compensated. And I do agree, it has to be not just a monetary, it has to be other things as well.
Yeah, so the compensation, the resources, the funding, the training element is already perceived in some of the surveys that we've done already to be along that road. And actually, there was a really great suggestion about when police get stolen goods, that they put that money into a pot, and that pot could be used to reimburse and provide additional resources and funding for some of this work. So you're kind of emphasizing some of the ideas that have already started emerging. Georgia.
Jacqui, Councillor Fajana-Thomas is now on the call.
Brilliant.
Yeah, so maybe.
Welcome.
Yeah.
Can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Thank you, Jacqui.
Thank you.
I'm so sorry.
It's okay. So thank you for making the effort, for sustaining that effort to join us. I wonder if you could just introduce yourself, and we might just ask you a couple of the questions that we asked the other councillors, if we may. So if you could introduce yourself and answer the question, how can we make sure community-led police accountability includes the right people and is representative of all Londoners, thereby ensuring that Black Londoners' experience of the police is better catered for? Your thoughts?
Okay, thanks very much, Jacqui. I'm in the town hall, and Hackney system is quite secured. For some reason, it was just bumping me out, so I wasn't able to log in. I'm Councillor Susan Fajana-Thomas from London Borough of Hackney. As I've said, I'm the Cabinet Member for Community Safety and Regulatory Services. Part of that includes having the scrutiny aspect of policing, as well as strategic relationship and community resilience, which is police accountability. I would say is an area of interest to me. You might just to say that I had the privilege of managing the first Safer Neighbourhood Board in London, which was the East Leighton one. And what I did in East Leighton was followed by other boroughs. But unfortunately, that was partly abolished. It was curated by MPA. And when the Tory government came in 2010, the quangos were abolished, and that went. So from that time, before that time, there was a standardized Safer Neighbourhood Board in London. But because that changed from MPA to MOPAC, things changes at that point. So it's quite disheartening where we are, in particular, the disproportionality in the use of police powers in London without accountability. And my thoughts around who is meant to be in the room, how do we want to, I think it is important if people that want to be in the room to scrutinize the police to have basic knowledge of what they are scrutinizing. What are the police powers? How do we scrutinize it? I know Councillor Hashi mentioned about training that sometimes you need to have probably masters in mathematics to being able to digest some of the data that is put in front of you. So it is important, and we were talking about resources. The resources is quite important for people, not just about remuneration for the leaders of any group, but to have a very decent place to hold meetings, have refreshment when they're holding meetings. So the funding, the resources is very important. And so that would be my suggestion. And when we are talking about being able to have the right people in the room, how do we have the right people in the room? We need to look within ourselves to see, do we want to put people that want change? There are two different, I'm a proud activist and a politician in the last 30 years, but there are some things you cannot do with confrontation or being an activist, that what you need to do is about policy change, is about influencing. How do we get people who are able to influence policies on the table? How do we, that is quite important. And where do we look when we are looking for people who want to be on this scrutiny or accountability or group? Are we looking into Black-led organization to nominate people on those groups? Are we looking to our churches? Are we looking to empower our young people, in particular the young Black men that are disproportionately impacted by police? What are we doing to get those people? Are we talking to our residents association? Or this has come again, the previous speakers have mentioned the inequalities. Most of the people that are impacted with these police powers are living on our estate. How are we talking to residents association, to TMOs, to make nominate people to be on local community representatives? I think all these are important. We still have a long way to go, but I think we can get there by, and happy the Black Tribe is leading this consultation, and I can't wait to see the recommendation that will come after. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much. And might I just ask a quick question, if I may, which is, you sort of affirmed a lot of the kind of thinking that our previous councillors have also sort of suggested around inclusivity at every levels and representation and proper resourcing in a range of forms. I'm just wondering, what is your view about how would we know if our overhaul to community-led engagement and scrutiny is actually working? How would we know that when we change it in the ways that we're imagining, that the difference is being made? What are your thoughts on that?
I think some of the way we can know is through perception. At the moment, the police perception and the reality of policing when it comes to the Black community, there are a lot of racism and discrimination. So we get to a stage where a young Black man can say, oh, I had an encounter with the police and it was quite pleasant, pleasant to what I've seen in the past. Then we need to see improvement in the disproportionality data. We need trust and confidence in data improvement. We need to have feedback from the community, in particular, again, Black community, and within the Black community, the people that are most impacted by negative policing, as well as community surveys would be good. I think by doing all those, we can see how community-led engagement, whether it's working or not.
That is so helpful. So actually what you're suggesting is an absolute range of different indicators, different you know, very specific sort of like indicators that can help us to get a better sense of whether or not the experience is improving. And I think that I'd also want to sort of like add, and this builds into some of the points that have been made earlier, how there's a responsibility, I think, from MOPAC and the police about presenting the data in an accessible way. Not just that it's data that's that only those in the know can understand, but actually in a way that's accessible to whatever is your way of understanding. It's much more inclusive in terms of how it's presented, and that is not something that's difficult to do. So there's something about taking responsibility from their level about supplying us with the information that we need in a way that we can understand. Yes, so that's some work to be done as well. So thank you for that. I wonder, George, if we could go back to have we got time even for any other questions, or is it that we've come to the end of this particular part of the session?
There's 1 minute left, Jacqui, so I'm not sure if we've got time for another question.
So what I would do is say thank you everybody for joining us today. What